What's up, everyone? Welcome to the channel. Today I'm going to be going over the Season 5 Reloaded Close Range meta. I'm going to be talking about all these contenders that are on this TTK chart right here, trying to help you guys pick the absolute best weapons, and then at the end of the video I'll give you the best builds as well. So as always, if you appreciate the content, all the work that goes into keeping all the data up to date on the website, don't forget to drop a subscription to the channel, a like on the video, and a comment on the video. But let's get into it, and we will talk about the close range meta. Alright, before I get into the actual TTK charts, I want to talk about what changed in this patch. So in the previous patch, the static HV and the Superi were pretty much the top two SMGs that everyone was using. Most people were using the static. So what actually changed in this patch? So the Rival 9, the max damage range was increased to 15.2 meters up from 12.7. So like a 3 meter, 2.5 meter increase in damage range for the first damage drop off. Not really super significant because, as I've said for years in my close range meta videos, it seems like TTK kind of ends up being king for close range, as long as the other stats aren't too bad, and the Rival 9's TTK just doesn't compete with a lot of these options. So I don't think this is going to be too important of a change for the Rival. Static HV got a pretty big group of changes here. So the mid damage was decreased, the max damage range, so the first damage drop off was increased or decreased to 14 meters from 16, so a 2 meter reduction in damage range for that first most important damage range. The near mid damage range was decreased to 25.4 from 30, so it lost about 4.5 meters for its next drop off. And then the drop off after that got also a 4.5 meter reduction from 40 down to 35. Headshot multiplier was decreased to 1.2x down from 1.4x. And then the leg and foot modifiers were decreased to 0.95x down from 1. So what do all those changes to the static actually do for the actual damage value? So in the first range, we've got the shots to kill tool up here on TGD. It used to do 42 to the head in the first range. Now it does 36, so a 6 damage reduction. It is still just one headshot off of neck, chest, stomach, upper arm, or lower arm to reduce that TTK down to 584 milliseconds. But we also got that reduction in leg damage. So upper leg, lower leg used to do 30. Now they do 28. And what that does is gives you the potential for 730 millisecond TTK if you hit those legs. And then if you get any leg shots at all, so you notice this one headshot to reduce the TTK will only ever be true if you get all of the other hitbox. So the neck, chest, stomach, upper arm, lower arm. So if you hit no leg and one headshot, your TTK will be reduced. But if you hit even one shot on the leg, that means that you're no longer going to be able to get this one headshot TTK reduction, because one headshot and 8 of those neck, chest, stomach, arm hitbox does exactly 300 damage. So that's 9 shots total, 300 damage on the dot. Whereas before, there was some leeway there where you could never actually even get 730 milliseconds because the upper leg, lower leg did exactly 30, which 30 damage does the exact same shots to kill as 33 damage. So it was always 10 shots to kill, 657 milliseconds, and then one headshot would reduce that. Now it is different where the upper leg, lower leg have lower damage and the headshot has lower damage. So you're still going to be able to do this occasionally where you get this 584 milliseconds, but it's going to be much, much less likely, and it's just not going to happen nearly as often. So it was an interesting nerf because like the TTK on paper doesn't look a whole lot different. It does show up in the combination TTK chart, whereas before on combination you'd get that potentially 584 or 657. Now it's only going to show 657 because of this leg damage. So it's just an interesting nerf. It basically makes it less likely to get the good numbers, but all the numbers are pretty much the same except for this leg where you do have a rare potential for 730 milliseconds now. Next up, the Striker. The Striker's kind of been a low recoil, pretty easy to use gun for a while, but it just doesn't have super competitive time to kill. The max damage range was increased to 14.5 meters up from 12.7, so almost 2 meters of increased range for that first damage drop off. Then the next drop off was increased by 2.5 meters as well, from 24 up to 26.6. So a little damage range buff there for the Striker. And next up, the Lockman Shroud with the Jack Decimator conversion kit. The max damage range was increased by 1 meter, so it used to be 12.4. Now it is up to 13.4. 1 meter increase for the full auto Lockman Shroud. All right, I'm just going to go through the TTK chart one at a time here with these weapons, and then if there's something notable, we'll go up and talk about the shots to kill tool during that. But we're going to start with 300 health combination shots. So static HV is the red line here. You can see that it has one of the worst TTKs now in the first range. That's because on combination, it no longer will show that 584. It's going to show the, I believe, 657 that first range. Yeah, 657, which is actually the slowest of all of these in the first range. Like I said, when I was talking about it, it is still possible to get 584, and it's still reasonably common. But if you hit a single leg shot, it's just not going to happen anymore. But it's just something to keep in mind. It is harder to use, and it has a little shorter damage range than it had before the patch. But it's still a very good option. It has great movement speed, tack spread if you're using it in tack stance. It's still an S tier option, just going to be much more often that you get that 657 TTK instead of the 584. Next up, WSP-9. This one's interesting. I talk about this every patch. It is, I think if it had a fast fire rate, it would probably be the meta, but it has that slow fire rate, which makes it kind of hard to use. So when you include open bolt delay, it is at 654, but if you turn off open bolt delay, if I turn that off, you're going to see that it jumps down to being tied with the fastest at 600 milliseconds. It is very, very good when open bolt delay doesn't matter, but a lot of the time in close range engagements, open bolt delay will matter. So it's one of those guns that's just interesting. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around the scenarios where certain things might matter, other times they won't. So we're going to turn that back on because I think in a lot of close range engagements, we do want to include open bolt delay. But I think it's an excellent gun. It hits hard, and I love using it on controller. It's still one of my absolute favorite guns on controller. Then we have the Superi here in blue. So Superi was the meta, and I think it's sneaking back into the meta again here. I actually, as I'm going through this, I think that the close range meta is really well balanced right now. I think it is pretty much a toss-up between a lot of the weapons that are in this comparison. So it's going to be hard for me to pick one and say, hey, this one's the absolute best. You guys should use this. I think they're all competitive in their own ways. Superi is one of those. It has great movement. It has one of those middle TTKs at 630 for the first range. It has a little bit longer damage range than some of the other options as well. And it's just a really easy gun to use with good mobility and good like SMG stats. So I do think it's very, very good. One of the top contenders for sure. Next up, FJX Horus in green. This is a very close range option. You're pushing people and you're getting really close to people frequently, then the FJX Horus is probably one of the best choices. It has really fast time to kill in the first range, but short damage range. So in the first damage range here, it's at 610 milliseconds, which is very fast. But with the build that is in this comparison, which is actually including the barrel that increases the damage range by some, it is only 9.9 meters of damage range for the Horus. So after that first drop off, you can see this green line as I toggle it is much, much slower than, say, like the MCW or the Lockman Shroud with the conversion kit, or even the Superi goes out a little bit further. So it's a tough sell. The recoil is hard too. So if the recoil was really beamy, then it might be okay. But I think that it's still the short damage range and the fact that there's a lot of other guns that have quite a bit better TTK for at least a few more meters, going to make it a hard sell for people, especially since the recoil is pretty tough to control. So it's an interesting gun. It's a good gun, but only if you're really pushing people. You're inside 10 meters pretty much all your fights, and you don't have your SMG out for those mid-range fights. Next up, WSP Swarm. This was the meta for a long time. This is very similar to the Horus. It has a little bit shorter damage range than the FJX Horus, and the drop-off is even more severe than the FJX Horus, but the TTK in the first range is a little bit better, and it has good SMG mobility stats, things like that. I don't think this is going to be the meta either, and it's mostly just because of how aggressive that damage drop-off is, and it's just, it only goes out to 8.7 meters with the build that's in this comparison, so it's tough to make that competitive when the second damage range has much worse TTK than the first. Next up, Lockman Shroud with the Jack Decimator. So on paper, this one looks amazing. This is one that we need to go look at the STK tool for in a second here. But yeah, it has the 600 millisecond TTK out to a pretty long damage range of 13.5 meters. So that's one of the longer damage ranges we've seen, and it has the fastest TTK in the first range for the chest TTK in these combination shot location percentages. And then it also has good drop-offs. So like even after that first 13.5 drop-off, it has really good TTK. It's this white line out here. So it looks like it's really good, but it's really hard to build this with good ADS, good sprint to fire, and good movement, and good reload time. It's just like, it's interesting because it has great TTK, but it's also inconsistent on the STK tool, and it has bad SMG stats. So it's just kind of tough to build that one to be competitive. Last up, we have two ARs. We have the MCW and the BP50, both with their conversion kits that make them more like SMGs. If I toggle this one here, you can see the MCW has the fastest TTK and the most range on those chest shots, but it's an AR, so it is a little slower, it's a little heavier, and really the only way to build it is with iron sights. So for me on mouse and key, I have a really hard time using iron sights, and the recoil is not great. So even though it has really good TTK, really long damage range, it's just not super competitive. Like it's a good choice. It's an awesome choice for like a sniper support or an aggressive sniper support, but it's just kind of hard to use as your SMG. As much as it looks like on paper it would be competitive, it just seems like it doesn't work out very well. I try to use it all the time, and it just doesn't seem like it well. Next up, BP50. This one is pretty good. It has great ADS time when you build it out, like 160 milliseconds, 150 milliseconds of ADS, which is crazy. Pretty good sprint to fire once you've built it out. But it just, I don't know, it's really shaky recoil. It has good TTK as well. It's 609 in the first range out to 12.2 meters. One of the things that holds back the MCW and the BP50, I just tweeted about this a few minutes ago, but they both have AR zoom. So if you didn't know this, SMGs have like, I call it on TG like a zoom multiplier. They have a zoom multiplier of like 0.9, 0.91, and then ARs have 1.0. So that's like when you use one of these guns, the MCW or the BP50, the conversion kits don't change that. So it's like playing on 110 FOV instead of 120 FOV, which in close range fights can be really weird and kind of disorienting when you're expecting 120 and then you ADS and it's not a normal SMG. It has 110 FOV instead of 120 FOV. So that's another thing that holds back both the BP50 and the MCW. I do think the BP50 is pretty competitive though. It's got the 60 round mag. It's got good damage range, good TTK. It's a really fun gun. It's very fast movement. I think it's a top tier choice as well. All right, so I said we needed to look at the STK tool for the Lockman Shroud with the conversion kit, and this is what I have up on the screen right now. You can see that it takes 7 headshots to reduce the TTK from 600 down to 525, which is obviously never going to happen. I mean, that's pretty much never going to happen. And then it only takes 3 shots on the stomach off of chest, or 2 on the upper or lower leg to increase that TTK up to 675. So it's just kind of going to get these TTKs a lot, the 675s. Then the 600 will get those really frequently, and it's never going to go below 600. So kind of a hard sell, especially since it has slower movement and ADS and sprint to fire compared to some of the other options. So it's hard for me to, even though it has that 600 millisecond chest TTK and looks like it's better than a lot of the other options, it's going to get this 675 a lot. So it's hard to recommend over some of the other choices. But like I said, I think the meta is decently balanced right now. Like we have multiple things that we can use here that are all going to be competitive in different ways. So what I would pick as the best here, I'm not going to give you like one best, I'm just going to give you like the top 4 or top 5. I think the BP50, the Superi are probably the top 2, followed extremely closely by the WSP-9, and then extremely closely again by the Static HV and the FJX Horus. I think those are the top 5. I would say, in my opinion, the Superi and the BP50 are 1 and 2, followed by the WSP, followed by the Horus, followed by the Static HV. I think Static HV and Horus are about tied. They're just completely different kinds of weapons. Like the Horus has that short damage range, fast time to kill. Static HV has the potential to be a fast time to kill with 1 headshot. But now that they've made these changes, it's going to be much more likely that you're not going to get that. So I just think that it's kind of been knocked back a little bit. And I think that the WSP has been great forever. The Superi has been great since it came out. And BP50 has been kind of a sleeper for a long time as well. All right, let's do some recommended builds here. So we're going to start with the BP50. I think this is one of the top options, like I said. For muzzle, I think that there's a few good options. You can pick the sonic suppressor if you want extra range and bullet velocity. It's going to hurt your sprint to fire a little bit, which is something we are already struggling to get down with this this weapon / conversion kit. Recoil is also not amazing, so that one's kind of tough. I do think the Quartermaster suppressor is very, very good for this. It again hurts your ADS and sprint to fire, but if you want to make this thing like a laser, then that is a great choice as well. And then the Scratch 20L or whatever it's called, the one that helps your firing aim stability that they added recently to the game, that's a good choice as well. Hurts your ADS time a tiny bit, but helps with a little bit of the visual recoil. And then just the Shadow Strike suppressor is always really good. It's got that, suppression with no penalties, so it's always a great choice there. So I'm going to pick the Shadow Strike for this build here. For laser, the Pro Sapphire cylindrical laser is the one I would recommend because it's only visible at your hip, and we're really trying to get the sprint to fire time down. That's one of the things this gun struggles with a lot, is sprint to fire. So we're going to put that on there, and then you can ADS walk around with this thing, and your laser will not be visible. So that is that's why I picked that one over some of the other ones that may have slightly better stats. Rear grip, again, sprint to fire is a big problem with this, so we're going to put the TCG tack tape rear grip on there. This helps 10% sprint to fire. Brings that down a little bit more, makes it a little bit more viable. And then either put ammunition or optic. I pretty much always go for optic, so I would just recommend using Jack classless optic as usual. Add that on there, and this would be pretty good. So it's a great gun. It's got that weird AR zoom that I don't like. but it does have great time to kill, good mobility, and a pretty good damage profile across the board. All right, taking that build into the firing range, you can see the laser disappears when I ADS. So you are able to ADS walk around and not have a laser showing, which is very valuable if you're like holding the corner waiting for somebody to push. Let me put this on 3 plates. I mean, the recoil is very easy. Pretty accurate gun. It bounces around a lot, but that doesn't matter so much in that first damage range, second damage range. You're still going to hit your shots because it's not bouncing so much that it's going to miss those. So I think this is a very competitive option. I really like it a lot, and I think it's top tier. All right, onto the WSP-9. This has been one of my favorite guns on controller for a long time now, and nothing changes with that here. I think it is a top tier choice. So we are going to do the Quartermaster Suppressor because this thing has really good stats, so we can get away with using something that, you know, increases our ADS and sprint to fire by a decent amount. You can see it does 8% ADS, 6% sprint to fire, but helps our recoil so much. And like I said, we can get away with it on this gun because those stats are going to be really good anyway. So we're going to throw that on there. Then we are going to put the Hiss short light barrel. This helps with sprint speed, tac sprint speed, ADS time, sprint to fire time. A really good SMG barrel there. Then we are going to throw on the Mark III reflector is a good choice. That's what I tend to use on a lot of SMGs. Mark III reflector or the Jack Glassless. Those are both great choices. I'm going to put the Mark III on there this time. And then let's put on the DR6 hand stop. That helps with movement speed, ADS time, sprint to fire time. It's just a great attachment for SMGs. Put that on there. And then magazine, you can put what you want on here. It shoots slow enough and hits hard enough that I felt like 40 rounds was plenty. If you don't feel like 40 rounds is enough, then use the 50 round. But I really did feel like the 40 round mag was, you know, plenty of damage per mag for me. All right, taking that into the firing range, it does have a little slower ADS time, so that's going to be a problem for some people. If the ADS time is too slow for you, if you try this build, just swap the Quartermaster Suppressor for the Shadow Strike Suppressor or something else that doesn't hurt your ADS time. That should help with that a lot. But the Quartermaster just really helps this thing be like really, really accurate at mid to long range for an SMG, so like 25 meters. Those fights do come up, and it is important to be accurate there. But I do think this is a competitive weapon. It's just that ADS time that's a little tough to bring down low enough. All right, on to the Superi 46. I think this has become, again, a very, very top tier choice, even after some of the nerfs it's gotten over the last couple patches. Some of the other things have gotten nerfed, bringing this one back into one of the top spots. So this build's gonna be slightly different than what I did last patch. We're still gonna do Quartermaster Suppressor, make this thing super accurate, but we're gonna balance that out by throwing high grain on there. So this does 15% range, 15% bullet velocity, but some extra gun kick, horizontal, vertical recoil. But these two attachments combined, you're gonna have much better recoil still than you had with just the base gun, and much more damage range. So that's kind of important right now because a lot of the SMGs are kind of pushing towards shorter damage range. And those fights at like 10 to 15 meters, those are very common fights with an SMG still. So I think it's very important to have that extra damage range if you can get it in a reasonable weapon. We're then going to use the DR6 hand stop to get this thing moving a little bit faster. So we got a bunch of movement speed, ADS time, sprint to fire time, brings that all down. Magazine, we're going to use the 40 round mag. And then we're still a little slow in ADS time and sprint to fire time, mostly because of the Quartermaster Suppressor. So we're going to bring that down with the Phantom Grip. This increases your flinch, but with SMGs, honestly, in SMG range, most of the time if you get flinched, you're just going to flinch either up the body a little bit more or into a headshot. So I don't think that's a huge problem with an SMG. With a long-range gun, definitely, because your target's so tiny, if you flinch a little bit, you're going to miss the target completely. But when you're up close and the target's big, the flinch doesn't matter that much. So this is 10%, almost 10% ADS time and 20% sprint to fire. This is an awesome attachment. Balances this thing out nicely, and I'll take it into the firing range. You guys will see it's still very accurate. All right, into the firing range with that Superi, you can see it's got very good ADS time, very good ADS movement speed, and then recoil-wise, still super, super accurate. I mean, this is like one of the most accurate SMGs, and it has great stats across the board, good TTK, one of the longest damage ranges of any of these choices because we're able to stick high grain on there on top of its base stats. So I think that this is potentially the meta again. It was the meta when it first came out, then it got nerfed a little bit. Static HV got released and was also highly competitive, but I think that this is going to be a tough gun to beat at this point. All right, next up, let's do the FJX Horus. This thing is very good, but it has really difficult recoil. So because of that, we are going to put the Quartermaster Suppressor on here. down at the bottom. So I'm just going to search it, quartermaster suppressor. It helps a ton with recoil, as we've been saying throughout. It desperately needs more damage range as well, so we're going to put the SIN-9 long barrel on there. This does 15% damage range, 20% bullet velocity, and it's just a pretty good attachment overall. The recoil is very bad on this, but we also have to get the sprint to fire down and the ADS down. It kind of feels like this thing is like one attachment short of being a really good option. So 48 round mag, they must have added the 60 round mag later on, because I don't have it on TGD, so I'll get that added. Either 48 or 60 round mag, depending on what mode you're playing, would be the right choice. I think that the optics or the iron sights are pretty bad on this thing, so we're going to put on an optic. I don't want to make the ADS time worse. You can use the jack glassless if you want, but just pick your favorite optic here, add that in. And then for the last attachment, you can either use the rear grip, the POC S tack grip, for help with your ADS time or sprint to fire, but it does hurt all your recoil properties with which like I said, I'll show you in the range, but this thing has a really sharp, jagged, jumping recoil for the first little bit, so we don't want to hurt our recoil if we can help it, but we really need to get that sprint to fire down and that ADS down. So that is an okay option there. I also think that this is a pretty new attachment as well in here, the OP SMG foregrip. So this hurts your recoil but doesn't hurt your gun kick, which is nice, and then it has similar effects on the ADS time and sprint to fire as that rear grip we were just looking at. It helps your ADS a little bit more, helps your sprint to fire a little bit less, and hurts your recoil a little bit less than the rear grip. So we're going to put that on there, and I think this makes it a pretty competitive choice with some of these other options, especially inside about 15 meters, which is where most of your SMG engagements are going to happen. But there are times where you're going to take fights that are longer than 15 meters, and in almost all those cases, I think that the Superi is just going to annihilate this thing because it has that weird recoil. So take this into the firing range and show you what I mean. All right, I've got that build in the firing range now. Really snappy ADS, pretty good movement. It's a little slower than the Superi and the ADS movement for sure. But this is the recoil that I'm talking about. So this is even with the quartermaster suppressor, which does like 23% horizontal recoil. You'll be able to see this zigzag here. So I'll shoot zigzags up to the right and then up to the left, and it does that every time. So you can get used to it and get, it's predictable after a while, but it's just a little zigzag S shape that's really difficult to control past about 15 meters. So like it's hard to hit that target at 25 meters consistently with every bullet, which the Superi has no problem with at all. So like those are situations that will happen. One thing that's nice about the Horus is that it has the same damage across the whole body, so it doesn't matter if you're hitting arms or legs, it doesn't matter. That doesn't change your TTK at all. But it's still kind of hard to control. Like even once you try to get used to it, it's not gonna be super accurate. Last up here, we're gonna do the static HV. This gun is still very good, even after the nerfs in this patch. So we're gonna use the quartermaster suppressor to get that recoil to be a little bit more controllable. A couple barrels in here are good. The Auger 840 light barrel is good, but it hurts your recoil 10% in every way. And to me, this doesn't feel like it has amazing recoil, so I don't really want to do that. Even with the quartermaster suppressor canceling most of that out and helping horizontal a little bit more, it just still felt kind of not great to me. So we're going to use the Garrote 8 long barrel. This is going to hurt your movement and ADS speed a little bit. Or sorry, no, just movement. It's just going to hurt your different movement speeds and your hip fire, but gives you 25% damage range and 25% bullet velocity. That pushes your first drop off out to 17.5 meters, which is well past almost all the other SMGs. So I think that is a great choice there. I don't like the iron sights on this thing, so we're going to use an optic. Pick your favorite one. Jack glassless is excellent. I'm just going to use one of the regular ones that doesn't hurt your ADS. So we've got the slate reflector on there, and then I think the Pry 34 light stock. And then for the last attachment, I think that we're trying to make this thing a little more accurate again. So we're going to use the new paracord grip. So if I search that, paracord grip, that is an excellent underbarrel that has no negatives. It's just all straight positives. So 15% horizontal recoil, 4% movement speed, 6% ADS movement speed, and 13% sprint to fire. That's crazy. It's just a great attachment for SMGs, and this is one of the ones that really benefits from it. I'll take this into the firing range. You'll see it's very accurate, has good ADS, good sprint to fire, good mobility, and crazy damage range. So I think it's still a meta choice. I think it's definitely one of the top choices. All right, I've got it in the firing range here. You can see pretty snappy ADS, amazing ADS movement speed still. We've got 17.5 meters of damage range, and then recoil-wise, these attachments with the quartermaster suppressor with the paracord grip, very, very accurate, have no problem hitting every shot out to 25 meters. It's not as beamy as the Superi, but it just has more damage range, and it has that potential to get down to the 584 millisecond TTK that we've talked about a bunch. So I think it is definitely a top tier meta choice. All right, everyone, that is it for the video. Thank you so much for watching. As always, the best way to support is just a direct subscription through True Game Data. That also gets you all of the premium features that we have on the website: MetaGen, True TTK Simulation, Best Stat Tool, STK Calculator. It's just, you'll get everything with that, and it also just supports us directly the most of anything. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.